The clinking of crystal glasses, celebrating the new public relations director, had just begun to fade when a thin, whistling sound rose from my throat like a damaged pipe. I am Brielle, an antique book conservator. Someone far more accustomed to the controlled environment of my laboratory, where the air smelled of lemon oil and 400-year-old paper, than to this lavish, overheated VP room. I was completely out of place, an awkward volume bound in plain linen among designer suits and calculated smiles. My older sister, Vivian, stood on the small podium at the front, her perfectly white teeth gleaming under the dim, golden lighting that made everything look like a luxury magazine spread. She leaned into the microphone with that practiced smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes, soaking in the reflected glory of her promotion at Thorn Global. The room was dripping with the atmosphere of new ambition and old money, the smell of truffles and expensive champagne heavy in the air. "Here we go again," Vivian announced, her voice dripping with theatrical exhaustion, meant to entertain the crowd. She focused her attention, which was already hers, entirely on me. "Brielle, please do not make a scene. It is just mushroom soup. There is no crab. Or do you want to ruin my promotion party?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the room. Vivian had scored points with her biting humor, playing to the crowd like the skilled public relations director she was. She was the golden child, magnetic and loud. I was the quiet one, the one who worked with fragile things in silence. My parents, who sat nearby, beamed at Vivian's success, their faces radiating pride. They loved to talk about Vivian's career, her connections, her visibility. They constantly dismissed my work, calling it dusty or depressing. To them, I was the disappointing daughter who chose books over boardrooms instead of money. Vivian was basking in their attention, in their approval. But she did not expect that the most important man in the room missed her joke entirely. Magnus Thorn, the group chairman, who had just signed her promotion papers, was staring at my soup bowl with an expression of absolute horror. Magnus Thorn's daughter also suffers from a deadly shellfish allergy. He had sufficient, tragic knowledge about anaphylaxis. He knew exactly what it looked like when someone's airway began to close. The tension that led to this near, fatal mistake began before the party even started. This dinner was meant to be Vivian's apotheosis, her victory lap. Yet, as guests arrived, fate had intervened with a cruel twist of attention. Vivian had been in the restaurant lobby, ready to intercept Magnus. To show him the media report she had prepared about the latest company acquisition. She wanted his attention, his praise, his validation. Instead, Magnus spotted me standing near the coat check. His face lit up with genuine, intellectual interest. He walked right past Vivian, who was left standing awkwardly with her report, and spent a full 20 minutes discussing the deacidification process of 18th century paper with me. He asked detailed questions about paper fibers, pH balance, and preservation chemistry, the kind of specifics I rarely shared outside of academic circles. He was fascinated. He told me about a collection of century-old letters his company had recently acquired and asked if I would consider consulting on their preservation. The conversation was genuine, respectful, and entirely focused on my expertise. It was professional validation I had never expected. Certainly not at my sister's party. I watched Vivian's face throughout that conversation. I saw the way her perfectly made-up jaw tightened. I saw the way her fingers curled into fists at her sides. I saw the rage building behind her eyes. This was supposed to be her night, her moment. And here I was, the little sister with the boring job, stealing the attention of the chief executive officer. Vivian's jealousy was not just sharp. It was pathologically dangerous. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to prove to everyone, especially Magnus, that I was weak, or worse, that I was faking my allergy to garner attention. She believed that a little crab essence would not kill anyone. She thought it would just make me itch. Perhaps give me some hives, making me lose face in front of the assembled guests. She wanted me to look dramatic, attention-seeking, and weak. This jealousy, this desperate need to be the center, was the engine that powered her to set her trap. It was the moment the emotional conflict with my sister moved from childhood resentment to life-threatening malice. I was not just a sibling to be managed. I was a competitor to be destroyed. It was this pure, unadulterated rage that drove Vivian to excuse herself and speak with Chef Bastien, laying the groundwork for the soup that was now constricting my throat. Her need for attention, her inability to let me have one moment of deserved recognition, had moved her from petty malice into the realm of attempted murder. The golden light of the VIP room, the soft music, the taste of delicious deception, it all vanished when the violent, choking reality began. I had missed the warning signs, the casual, calculated cruelty hidden behind a sisterly smile, because I had spent too long wishing she could be kind. All my professional training, my cautious nature developed over years of handling brittle, century-old paper, failed me in the face of my own family. The trap, I pieced together later, was set with the same deceptive precision Vivian used in her public relations campaigns. She had excused herself from the table 30 minutes before the soup course. She found Chef Bastien in the kitchen, a man celebrated for his creative and often surprising interpretations of classic French cuisine. Vivian turned on that full, megawatt public relations smile. "Chef Bastien," she said, her voice honeyed, "I have a special request. Everyone praises your famous crab fat oil, the one you use in your signature bouillabaisse. It is supposed to be incredible." The chef, pleased by the flattery, nodded. His crab fat oil was indeed famous, an amber-colored, intensely flavorful liquid made from slowly rendering crab roe and fat. It was a secret weapon of deep umami in his cooking. I was wondering. Vivian continued, leaning in conspiratorially. "Hoof today. On this important day for me, you could add just a touch of that crab oil to the truffle mushroom soup. I think the combination would be extraordinary. Novel. Unexpected." The chef was surprised. Crab and truffle were not a traditional pairing, but he was an artist and Vivian had made the request sound like high-level culinary appreciation. "For you, Miss Cole, on your special evening," he had agreed. "I will prepare one bowl with the crab oil as an amuse, botch before the main soup course." Vivian thanked him sweetly, then ensured that the server, a young man named Amdi, understood that this specific, special bowl, the one with the gorgeous reddish-brown swirls on top, was to be placed directly in front of me. She had masked the lethal ingredient with the sophisticated scent of truffle and the familiar, earthy sweetness of mushroom extract, transforming a weapon into a culinary masterpiece. When the soup arrived, it was beautiful. The amber color of the crab fat oil shimmered in the dim light, looking exactly like the highly refined truffle oil Etoile was known to use. The intense scent of black truffle filled my nostrils, completely masking any trace of the slight fishy smell I might have otherwise detected. Vivian leaned over to me, her voice soft and sisterly. "A perfect performance." I asked the chef to add a little smoked chili oil and pine mushroom extract to yours. She whispered, "I know you find rich food overwhelming sometimes, so I thought this would make it easier to eat. The chili adds a nice warmth without being too heavy." I should have known better. I am a cautious person by nature. My job demands that I question everything, test every solution, verify every procedure before I touch a 400-year-old document. But the luxury of the space, the golden lighting, and the casual intimacy of her voice deceived my senses. The soup itself was a perfect deception. I suspected absolutely nothing. I picked up my spoon and ate a small mouthful. The taste was incredible, rich, savory, complex. For about 5 seconds, I thought my sister had finally done something kind for me. Then, my throat began to close. The reaction was immediate and violent. My throat constricted like someone had wrapped a massive, relentless fist around my windpipe and was squeezing with all their strength. My lips started to tingle, then burn, then swell quickly. My tongue thickened in my mouth, blocking the already closing airway. My skin erupted in hives, angry red welts that spread across my arms and chest like wildfire. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't support me. The room tilted sideways. I fell from my chair, hitting the plush carpet hard enough to knock the wind out of me, or what little air I had left. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I could only claw at my throat and make those horrible, ragged wheezing sounds that did not sound human. And through the rising noise of the party, I heard my sister laughing. Not a nervous laugh. Not an, "Oh no, what have I done?" laugh. A triumphant, cruel sound. See? Vivian's voice cut across the room. She is eating mushrooms and pretending to be allergic to crab. This year's Oscar for Best Actress goes to Brielle Cole. There was uncertain laughter from some guests. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure if this was a family joke or something more serious. "Come on, Brielle," Vivian continued, walking closer to where I was writhing on the floor. "You can drop the act now. You have got everyone's attention. Isn't that what you wanted? To make my special night all about you." I tried to look at her, tried to make her see that this was not an act, that I was genuinely dying. But my vision was starting to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges of my sight. This is how it ends, I thought, killed by my own sister at a dinner party. While everyone watches and thinks it is a joke, the humiliation was nearly as suffocating as the anaphylaxis. Just when the black spots began to dance at the edge of my vision, help arrived not from my family, but from a man who understood fragility and swift action. I heard Magnus Thorne's voice cut through the laughter, cold as Arctic ice, devoid of any humor. "She is having anaphylactic shock," he roared, his voice carrying the full, authoritative weight of a man who commanded multinational corporations. "Someone call an ambulance now." He was already moving. He was pulling an EpiPen from the inside pocket of his $1,000 suit, rushing toward me with a speed that seemed impossible for a man of 58. He dropped to his knees beside me, his movement fluid, devoid of panic. The kind of absolute control I used to conserve a priceless, disintegrating manuscript. Vivian's laughter died in her throat. The uncomfortable snickers from the surrounding guests ceased instantly, replaced by a stunned, suffocating silence. This was no longer a joke. This was a crisis recognized and commanded by the person whose approval Vivian valued most in the world. "Mauve," Magnus shouted again, directing the panicked waiter who had frozen near the table. "Clear a path. Call 911 immediately. Tell them we have a severe case of anaphylaxis and need immediate transport." He turned to me, his focus absolute. His face was grim but steady. His eyes locked on mine, trying to pull me back from the edge of unconsciousness. "Hold still, Brielle," he said, his voice calm despite the surrounding panic. "You are going to be okay, I have got you." I was clawing weakly at my throat, but he ignored my frantic movements. He pulled the cap off the EpiPen with a sharp click. There was no hesitation, no question of propriety or embarrassment. He jabbed it into my thigh, right through the heavy fabric of my dress. The needle punched through cloth and skin, and I felt the rush of epinephrine flooding my system like ice water in my veins. The effect was not immediate, but it was noticeable. The crushing pressure on my throat eased just slightly. Just enough for me to drag in a thin, whistling breath, a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. It was painful, but it was air. Ambulance. Magnus urged, looking around at the stunned staff, forcing them into motion. Call emergency services right now, and someone get me oxygen if you have it, from the first aid kit, now. The restaurant manager, his face white, was already stammering the address into his phone to the emergency dispatcher. A waiter ran to the bar, scrambling to locate the first aid supplies. Magnus stayed on his knees, his hand resting on my shoulder, a physical anchor in the spinning room. "Stay with me, Brielle," he commanded, his voice deep and rough. "The ambulance is coming. You are going to make it." I lay on the plush carpet, dragging thin, painful breaths, and through the haze of terror and adrenaline, I watched Vivian's face. The smug satisfaction drained away instantly. Her smile faltered, replaced by something I had never seen on her before: raw, unmasked terror. She looked at Magnus kneeling beside me, at the EpiPen in his hand, at the grotesque swelling of my lips, and she was finally beginning to realize that her prank had gone much further than she intended. She had crossed a boundary she couldn't retreat from. She stammered, backing up a step, her perfect voice trembling. "I did not think." My mother rushed over, her face pale with shock. "What happened? What is wrong with her?" "She is having anaphylactic shock," Magnus said sharply, cutting through my mother's rising hysteria. "Someone put shellfish in her food. This is not a joke or an exaggeration. Without this epinephrine, she would be dead in minutes." My father, who had been frozen in his chair, looked from the untouched soup bowl to Vivian. I saw the slow, dawning comprehension spread across his features. The color left his face, replaced by a terrible gray. "Vivian," he said slowly, heavily. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Vivian replied instantly, her voice high and strained, a lie rehearsed without conviction. "I just asked for mushroom soup. There was not supposed to be any crab in it." But before she could continue her pathetic denial, the critical rush of epinephrine hit me properly. The life-saving drug was doing its job, forcing my heart to pump faster, opening my airways a crucial fraction, giving me back a sliver of my strength. With that strength came absolute clarity, the ruthless logic I usually reserved for chemically stabilizing 400-year-old bindings. I reached out and grabbed Magnus Thorne's wrist with surprising force, my fingers locking around his expensive watch like a vice. He looked down at me, startled by the sudden grip, the desperate strength. I could not speak yet, my throat was still too swollen. But I could communicate. I pointed at the soup bowl with my free hand. Then, I made a fist and held it up, the universal sign I used in my studio for keep or hold or preserve. I needed him to understand that this was not just soup, it was evidence. It was the only tangible proof of what my sister had done. Magnus understood immediately. He might not have been a police officer or a lawyer, but he was a billionaire who had built an empire on his ability to read situations and act decisively in a crisis. He knew exactly what I was telling him. "No one touches that soup," he roared, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, cutting through the rising panic. "Security. Seal this table. This is a crime scene." The restaurant security guards, who had been hovering uncertainly at the edges of the room, immediately sprang into action. They formed a barrier around the table, preventing anyone from approaching the scene of the crime. "Mr. Thorne," Vivian started, forcing a brittle laugh that sounded entirely fake. "Isn't that a bit dramatic? It is just a misunderstanding. Nothing leaves this room." Magnus interrupted her, his voice cold as Arctic ice. "Not the dishes. Not the soup. Not a single napkin. Everything stays exactly where it is until the authorities arrive." My mother grabbed Vivian's arm, her face frantic. "Tell me you did not do this on purpose, Vivian. Tell me this was an accident." Vivian opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Her face had gone sheet white. the reality of the situation. The chief executive officer of her company, declaring the scene a crime and calling the police, was hitting her with the force of a truck. I lay on the floor, still holding Magnus's wrist, and felt a cold, hard satisfaction spread through me. It was not triumph, it was the grim, ruthless clarity of survival. Despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the fact that I could barely breathe, I had used my last bit of strength to preserve the most important evidence. The soup that nearly killed me, the proof of what my sister had done. That was my first small victory. The professional conservator, the quiet, cautious one, had acted with surgical precision to save the evidence that would ultimately save her life and destroy her aggressor. "You are a fighter," Magnus said quietly, leaning over me, his hand steady on my shoulder. "Good. You are going to need that." The black spots were creeping in again, but I was not afraid. I was focused. The knowledge that the evidence was protected was my anchor as the paramedics finally burst into the room, their voices and movements urgent and professional. The fight for physical life was transferring to the fight for justice. And I had ensured the initial move was mine. The adrenaline-fueled chaos soon gave way to a cold, hard silence as the truth of what Vivian had done was laid bare before everyone who mattered. The paramedics worked on me right there in the VIP room, while Magnus gave orders like a general commanding troops in a field hospital. They administered another dose of epinephrine, hooked me up to oxygen, and checked my vital signs. My blood pressure was dangerously low. My oxygen saturation was in the 70s. "We need to transport immediately," one of the paramedics said urgently. "She needs to be in the emergency room under observation. Anaphylaxis can have a biphasic reaction. She could crash again in a few hours." But before they could wheel me out on the stretcher, Magnus turned to face Vivian. His expression was carved from stone, his posture radiating lethal calm. "You said this was normal mushroom soup?" he asked her, his voice deadly quiet. Vivian's hands were shaking violently. She clasped them together in front of her dress to hide it. "Yes," she stammered, the word cracking. Of course it was normal mushrooms. The girl always overreacts to everything. She is probably just having a panic attack. A panic attack does not cause your airway to close, Magnus said flatly, his eyes narrow. A panic attack does not require an EpiPen. Stop lying. That was the precise moment Chef Bastien burst into the VIP room. He had been in the kitchen, alerted by Andy, the server, that a medical emergency involving the soup had occurred and that a guest was allergic to shellfish. The news had hit him like a physical blow. "Miss Vivian," he said, his face flushed with distress and confusion. "The waiter just told me what happened. But I do not understand. You requested the crab fat oil yourself. You asked me to add it to the truffle soup." A tense, suffocating hush cut through the chaos. Every single eye in the banquet room turned to Vivian. The sound of the paramedics' equipment seemed deafening in the vacuum of the silence. "You said you liked it?" Chef Bastien continued, unknowingly signing her death warrant with every word he uttered. He was merely trying to understand how his prized ingredient had caused such a terrifying scene. "You said it would be novel and unexpected. I thought you wanted to try it." Andy, the young waiter who had served our table all evening, stepped forward then, hesitantly. He was pale, clearly terrified, but he felt compelled to confirm the truth. "And Miss Vivian signaled for me to place that specific bowl in front of Miss Brielle," he added quietly. "I remember, because you made very clear eye contact with me and pointed directly to her seat." Silence. Complete, total, suffocating silence. I lay on the stretcher, the oxygen mask covering the lower half of my face. And I watched my family's illusions collapse in real time. My father's face had gone gray, the proud color drained completely away. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a small, wretched sound. They were staring at Vivian like they had never seen her before. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not even negligence. This was a deliberate trap, carefully planned and coldly executed, all because of a moment of stolen attention. "Vivian," my father said, his voice hollow and weak. "Tell me they are wrong. Tell me you did not do this on purpose." Vivian looked around the room wildly, like a cornered, terrified animal searching for an escape route, a public relations solution to a medical and legal disaster. "I just thought," she stammered, her voice rising now, becoming shrill and defensive. "I mean, she always makes such a big deal about her allergy. I thought if she just had a tiny bit, she would realize she has been exaggerating all these years. I thought it would just make her a little uncomfortable, maybe get some hives. I never meant for it to be this serious." "You never meant to almost kill your sister," Magnus said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass, his disgust absolute. "Is that your defense? It was supposed to be harmless." Vivian pleaded, her composure totally lost. She is always so dramatic about everything. "I just wanted her to stop being the center of attention for once. This is my night, my promotion, and she has to make it all about her and her stupid allergy." "Shut up," my father said. I had never heard him speak to Vivian that way before. In our family, Vivian was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, who was always defended. My father's harsh, broken tone shocked everyone into silence again. "We need to leave," one of the paramedics said urgently, pulling the stretcher. Her condition could deteriorate. They started wheeling me toward the door. As I passed my family, I looked each of them in the eye. My mother was crying openly, her perfect makeup running down her pale cheeks. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. And Vivian looked purely terrified, her successful future dissolving before her eyes. Good, I thought. Be terrified. As the paramedics continued to move me, and the door to the VIP room beckoned, I saw Magnus Thorne step out onto the sidewalk, phone already in hand, his finger hovering over a contact. "I am calling the police," he announced to the room, his voice loud enough for Vivian and our parents, who were hovering anxiously to hear. "This is attempted murder, or at the very least, aggravated assault. Miss Cole will be arrested tonight." Vivian went white as paper, the last vestiges of color in her face drained away completely. "No," she whispered, frantic. "No, please, Mr. Thorne. It was a mistake. I did not mean. You admitted to deliberately contaminating your sister's food with a substance you knew she was deathly allergic to," Magnus said coldly, cutting her off. "You did this at a company event, using company resources, while representing Thorne Global as our new public relations director. If I call the police right now, you will be in handcuffs before midnight. Your career will be over before it begins." My mother grabbed Vivian's arm, whimpering. "Oh, my sweet girl, what have you done?" My father stood frozen, his brain clearly trying to calculate the social and professional fallout of having a daughter arrested for attempted murder at a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. The scandal would be enormous, unavoidable. But I saw my opportunity. Lying on the stretcher, my throat still swollen, my voice a painful rasp, I raised my hand. I clawed the oxygen mask down from my face. "Ma'am, please, keep that on," the paramedic insisted, trying to replace it. "You need the oxygen." I pushed her hand away weakly but firmly. "Wet," I managed to croak out. The single word felt like swallowing broken glass. Magnus turned to look at me, startled. Everyone went silent, straining to hear what I would say. I looked directly at Magnus, my eyes clear despite everything my body had just endured. "Do not call the police. Yet," I said, each word a physical struggle. The paramedic was checking my monitors anxiously. Arresting the public relations director will cause Thorn Global's stock to plummet. I do not want to affect your assets. I took a ragged, whistling breath. My lawyer. We will handle it. Tomorrow. The relief that flooded my family's faces was almost comical, a sickening mix of gratitude and self-interest. My mother let out a sob of thanks. My father's shoulders sagged in release. They thought I had shown mercy. They thought I had chosen family loyalty. Brielle, Vivian said, stepping closer to the ambulance, her voice taking on that sweet, manipulative tone again. I know you are upset right now, and you have every right to be. But we are sisters. We are family. We can work through this together, maybe some therapy. Some family counseling. I held up my hand to stop her. When I spoke again, my voice was a breathless whisper, but crystal clear, carrying the full weight of my shattered trust. My lawyer will contact you with the terms. Terms? Vivian blinked confused. For the settlement. I clarified, fighting the urge to cough. You are going to pay. For what you did. Every penny. Her face hardened. You are going to sue me. Your own sister? Would you prefer prison? I asked simply. 8 years? State facility. Or a civil settlement? Your choice. Magnus looked at me with something like approval in his eyes. Your lawyer should call my office as well, he said. I will make sure Chef Bastian and Andy provide full statements about what happened tonight. Thorn Global will cooperate completely with any legal proceedings. Thank you, I whispered, allowing the paramedic to finally replace the mask. I had given them a choice, but it was not an act of forgiveness. It was the strategic conversion of a criminal charge into an inevitable financial transaction. I needed time. Time to build an airtight case. Time to let them relax their guard. Time to gather every piece of evidence that would make what came next absolutely undeniable. Vivian thought, tomorrow, meant gentle negotiation. She had no idea what was truly coming. As the ambulance doors closed on my old life, I began preparing for the new one. Converting my trauma into a perfectly built legal weapon, I spent 3 days in the hospital. The anaphylaxis had done more damage than the doctors initially realized. My vocal cords were inflamed and damaged from the swelling, requiring weeks of speech therapy to fully recover. The repeated doses of epinephrine had strained my heart, requiring constant cardiac monitoring. But I did not rest. I did not waste a single moment feeling sorry for myself or dwelling on the betrayal. On the second day, while still hooked up to intravenous lines and monitors, I had my lawyer, Mr. Lewis, visit me. He was a sharp, aggressive attorney in his mid-40s, known for his ruthless efficiency in civil litigation. Tell me everything, he said, pulling out his tablet to take notes. I relayed the story. Every cold detail, Magnus's interest, Vivian's jealousy, the deliberate manipulation of the chef, the physical evidence of the soup, and the confession in front of witnesses. This is airtight, Mr. Lewis said, his eyes gleaming. She confessed in front of a room full of people, including the chief executive officer of a major corporation. We have the chef's testimony, the server's testimony, and the physical evidence protected by Thorn himself. I want affidavits from Chef Bastian and Andy, I said, my damaged voice barely above a whisper. In writing, notarized, before they have a chance to be pressured by my family or anyone else. And a full medical report documenting every injury, the throat damage, the cardiac strain, the psychological trauma, everything. Consider it done, he assured me. And the demand? $900,000. I specified without hesitation. That is enough to ruin her financially, but not so much that it seems unreasonable to a mediator. It covers my medical expenses, lost income, pain and suffering, and the cost of psychiatric care. I looked at him steadily. I want her destroyed, Mr. Lewis. Not hurt, not embarrassed. Destroyed. And I want this settled in mediation, quickly, 3 weeks from tonight. My silence is not forgiveness. It is strategy. While I recovered at home over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Lewis worked like a man possessed, compiling the damning case file. My family thought I was healing, processing the trauma, deciding whether to forgive and forget. My mother sent expensive flowers, which I immediately donated to the hospital. My father called twice, leaving rambling voicemails about not letting this tear the family apart. And Vivian sent a single text message. Can we talk? I think there has been a misunderstanding. I did not respond to any of them. I maintained an absolute, chilling silence. My silence was the quiet before the storm, the moment when the conservator holds her breath and aims carefully. When Mr. Lewis called on day 19 to tell me the mediation was scheduled for day 21, exactly 3 weeks after the incident, I smiled for the first time since the poisoning. Perfect. I whispered into the phone, my voice still hoarse but getting stronger every day. Let us end this. 3 weeks after nearly dying, I walked into a beige corporate room, ready to watch my family's carefully constructed illusions shatter with the snap of a briefcase. It had taken every ounce of strength I had to get here. 3 weeks for the swelling in my throat to subside enough that I could speak without pain. 3 weeks for my body to stabilize enough that I could sit upright for more than an hour without my heart racing like a trapped bird. And 3 weeks for Mr. Lewis to compile every scrap of evidence into a legal file so airtight that even the most expensive defense attorney in the state would advise their client to settle immediately. This was the mediation room. It smelled of lemon furniture polish and desperation. A neutral, corporate space designed for quiet surrender. Beige walls, a long oak table, and leather chairs that squeaked slightly whenever you shifted your weight. This was the kind of room where million-dollar deals died quietly, where careers ended with a signature instead of a scene. I arrived early with Mr. Lewis, dressed simply in a tailored suit, projecting the kind of quiet, unassailable confidence that came from having nearly died, and returned with a single, clear objective. My hands still trembled slightly from the medication I would be on for the next 6 months, a constant, physical reminder of the attack. I wasn't sure I wanted those tremors to fade. They were a necessary, involuntary truth. Mr. Lewis placed his briefcase on the table, centering it with military precision. He checked the water glasses and the arrangement of pads and pens. He was preparing the field for his client, the surgical strike team. Remember our agreement, Brielle? He reminded me quietly. Speak only when necessary. Let the evidence do the talking. Do not let them manipulate your emotions. They will try to use sentiment. They will try to use guilt. Do not engage. I nodded, folding my hands neatly on the table. The cool wood felt grounding beneath my palms. I was ready. I was not the accommodating little sister who had swallowed every slight in silence anymore. That girl had died on the carpet of Atoil. Vivian walked in 12 minutes late. Of course she did. Even now, facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges, she couldn't resist the power play of making everyone wait. It was an ingrained need to dominate the space. She wore a dove gray dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back in a soft chignon that screamed innocent victim or grieving sister. Her makeup was perfect. Just enough to look put together, not so much that she seemed callous. It was the careful public relations crafting of her image, even here, in a room meant for raw truth. But it was her expression that made my stomach tighten. That carefully practiced look of remorse. Eyes just slightly wider than usual. Lips pressed together in what was supposed to be anguished restraint. I had seen that face 1,000 times growing up. It was the face she made when she wanted something. When she needed someone to believe her. When she was about to lie so smoothly that even she might believe it. Mom and Dad flanked her like bodyguards. Dad's jaw was set in that stubborn way that meant he had already decided how this was going to go. It was going to be settled quietly, quickly, and I was going to be the good sister who made it happen. Mom kept glancing at me with eyes that held something I had never seen before: fear. Fear mixed with a desperate kind of pleading. They looked at me the way people look at a bomb timer counting down, knowing they had to defuse it with soft words. Brielle. Mom started, her voice doing that soft, soothing thing she used to do when I was little and had scraped my knee, minimizing the real damage. Honey, we are so glad you are feeling better. We are all just so relieved to see you well. I did not respond. I simply folded my hands tighter on the table and waited. Vivian leaned forward, and right on cue, her eyes began to glisten, tears carefully held in reserve. Brielle, I need you to know how sorry I am. I swear. I only thought you would get an itchy rash or something. Maybe your throat would get a little scratchy. I just wanted to tease you a bit. You know. Get you to loosen up. Stop being so serious all the time. She reached across the table, her hand extended in a gesture of false reconciliation. A carefully choreographed move for the mediator, though no mediator was yet present. I pulled my hands back. I did not know, she continued. And now there were actual tears, falling gracefully down her cheek. They were impressive, really. I did not know you would almost die. If I had known, I never would have. Stop. The word came out harder than I intended, sharp enough that everyone in the room flinched. My mother jumped in immediately, running interference. Brielle, please. Your sister made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But she did not mean for things to go this far. After all, she did not think it would be this bad. Can't you just let it go? Let it go. As if my sister hadn't watched me convulse on a restaurant floor. As if she hadn't put crab fat oil into my soup, and then sat there, wineglass in hand, waiting to see what would happen. As she did not think it would be this bad, was somehow supposed to be a defense for poisoning someone. Dad cleared his throat. His voice took on that heavy, paternal weight that used to make me fall in line as a kid, the voice of the family patriarch. Brielle, I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens, we are your only family, aren't we? Family forgives. Family moves forward. Something inside me cracked. But not the way they wanted. I felt it in my chest, that final tether snapping clean. The obligation, the guilt, the desperate childhood wish that someday they would choose me first. All of it fell away like dead weight. My voice came out shaking, but not from weakness. From rage, from grief, from the sudden, dizzying clarity of someone who had just stepped out of a burning building and could finally see the sky. No. Vivian's perfectly crafted expression flickered. No, I do not want a family like this. I looked at each of them internally. Vivian with her designer victimhood, Mom with her enabler's desperation, Dad with his patriarch's entitlement. I absolutely will not let it go. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the faint whirring of the ventilation system. The family dynamic had been shattered, the unspoken rules violated. Mr. Lewis chose that moment. He leaned forward and opened his briefcase. The snap of the lock sounded like a judge's gavel in the stillness. Miss Cole, he said, addressing Vivian with the kind of clinical coldness that made it clear there were no diminutives here, no sisterly nicknames, no family ties that would soften what came next. You are a public relations director. You have built a career on understanding optics, on manipulating narratives, on knowing exactly how actions will be perceived. He pulled out a document, slid it across the table toward Vivian's hands. which means you are smart enough to know the boundary between a prank and attempted manslaughter. Vivian's face went white. That is not. I did not. We have testimony from Chef Bastien confirming that you specifically requested crab fat oil be added to your sister's soup. Mr. Lewis's voice never rose, never wavered. We have testimony from Andy, the server, confirming that you personally ensured the soup went to your sister's place setting. He pulled out another document. We have toxicology reports confirming the presence of shellfish proteins in Miss Brielle Cole's system at concentrations consistent with deliberate contamination. He pulled out another, then another. He was not negotiating, he was delivering a pre-packaged verdict. And finally, Miss Cole. We have your text messages to Chef Bastien from 3 days before the dinner, asking about ingredients that could cause a reaction. We have your internet search history. How much shellfish causes allergic reaction? Can you hide crab oil in soup? Symptoms of severe allergic reaction. Each piece of evidence onded on the table like a stone in still water. Ripples spreading outward, confirming the truth they had tried so desperately to bury. This was premeditated, Miss Cole, Mr. Lewis said, his tone condemning, which elevates it beyond reckless endangerment. The district attorney's office has indicated they would pursue charges of aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Given the evidence of planning, you are looking at 8 years in a state correctional facility. The color drained from my parents' faces entirely. Vivian started shaking her head, fast, frantic. No, that is not, I did not mean. Alternatively, Mr. Lewis continued, his tone shifting just slightly, like a door opening a crack, offering a calculated escape route. My client is willing to settle this matter civilly. We will forego criminal prosecution in exchange for full compensation for medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Dad found his voice a choked rasp. How much? Mr. Lewis looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. $900,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. It was the cost of my survival. It was the cost of Vivian's freedom. That is insane. Vivian's careful composure shattered completely. Her voice was high-pitched, desperate. I do not have that kind of money. Nobody our age has that kind of chance. You have a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights, valued at approximately $400,000. Mr. Lewis recited without looking at notes, his knowledge unnervingly comprehensive. You have jewelry, a vehicle, investment accounts. Your parents have retirement funds, home equity. He leaned forward, his focus absolute. The alternative is prison time, a criminal record, and civil liability that could follow you for decades. This settlement includes a comprehensive release of liability and a non-disclosure agreement that protects your reputation. You get to keep your freedom and whatever dignity you have left. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a desperate sob. Dad stared at the table, as if the wood grain might rearrange itself into a solution. Vivian looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in our lives. I saw the moment she understood that this was no longer her baby sister. This was not the girl who would swallow every slight, who would make herself smaller so Vivian could shine brighter. This was someone who had nearly died and decided that survival was not enough. I wanted restitution. I wanted consequences. I wanted everything she had used to hurt me. Her arrogance, her status, her perceived infallibility, turned against her. You cannot do this, she whispered, her voice hollow. I met her gaze, steady. I can. I am. My parents looked at me with eyes full of something I had never seen directed at me before: fear. And underneath it, hatred. The kind of hatred you reserve for someone who has broken the unspoken family rules, who has refused to play their assigned role. I looked away. Their opinions did not matter anymore. I had achieved the point of absolute, cold detachment. The family was broken, but I was whole. The facts were undeniable, the legal path set. All that remained was the transaction freedom for their financial ruin. It took 45 minutes of brutal, contained negotiation after Mr. Lewis laid out the evidence. 45 minutes of my father trying to argue the $900,000 amount down. Offering $70,000, then $150,000. Then finally $300,000, grasping at the hope that I was still the negotiable. Accommodating daughter he remembered. Brielle, please, you know how much money that is. He pleaded, his voice cracking with the strain of realizing his retirement was now a bargaining chip. That is our entire fund. Your mother and I worked for 30 years. And I almost died 45 minutes into a dinner party. I replied simply, my voice level. I held his gaze. The price is not negotiable. It is the cost of my life, the cost of my rehabilitation, and the cost of the fact that your oldest daughter planned this in advance. My mother started crying again, a low, desperate sound, reaching blindly for my father's hand. We will take out a second mortgage, Alistair. We will use the house. We cannot let her go to prison. She was crying for Vivian, for the preservation of her own comfortable life, for the scandal they could not survive. She was not crying for the sister who nearly died. I watched her tears without a flicker of emotion. The realization that they valued their social standing and Vivian's freedom over their financial security was the final, inevitable piece of evidence I needed against them. Vivian alternated between flashes of pure, burning rage and moments of trembling, desperate calculation. When Mr. Lewis reiterated the minimum sentence of 8 years based on the evidence of premeditation, the rage evaporated, leaving only fear. I will not survive that, she whispered, her voice stripped bare of its public relations polish. I cannot go to prison. I will be ruined. You are ruined, Vivian, I stated, keeping my voice low so only she could hear, a surgical incision of truth. The choice now is simply the manner of your ruin. Civilly, with freedom and a non-disclosure agreement protecting your reputation, or criminally, with handcuffs and a mugshot in the morning. The defense attorney, a sleek, expensive woman who had watched the entire proceeding with a grim, professional understanding, finally intervened. She leaned toward Vivian and spoke in a low, sharp tone. Vivian, the evidence for aggravated assault is overwhelming. Your internet search history is definitive. Take the settlement now. You are getting off easy. It was the final nail. Hearing the advice from her own counsel, the full weight of the truth finally registered in Vivian's eyes. She looked at me, her expression shifting one last time into naked, pure hatred. She hated me for surviving, and she hated me even more for being the one with the power now. Dad, defeated, pulled a pen from his breast pocket. We will sign as co-guarantors, he told Mr. Lewis, his voice thick with shame. We need 3 months to liquidate the apartment and our funds. 90 days. Full payment within 90 days. Mr. Lewis confirmed, his pen poised over the agreement. First installment due in 2 weeks. It was done. The settlement papers were placed in front of them. I watched Vivian's hand shake uncontrollably as she put pen to paper, watched the careful, elegant signature that had probably graced 1,000 public relations documents now, binding her to financial obliteration. I watched my parents sign as co-guarantors, their retirement security traded for their golden child's freedom. Each signature was a chunk of their old life, being willingly sacrificed to preserve the social illusion. When all the papers were collected and the terms were set, the first installment due in 2 weeks, the case closed on full payment. Vivian looked at me one last time. Her eyes were tear-streaked, but hard. I am your sister, she said, her voice hollow and accusatory. I stood up, gathering my coat, the final, cold act of severance. "No," I replied. "You are someone who tried to kill me. There is a difference." I turned, leaving the table without another glance at the defeated forms of my mother and father. Mr. Lewis collected his materials with the swift, silent efficiency of a professional who had just closed a successful, if ugly, chapter. I walked out of that beige room, out of that building, into afternoon sunlight that felt like absolution. Behind me, I heard my mother crying softly. I heard my father's voice, angry now, saying my name like a curse. I did not look back. Their opinions were irrelevant. They thought I had shown mercy by choosing civil settlement over criminal prosecution. They thought they had retained control by keeping Vivian out of a jail cell. They thought they were still a family unit, albeit one that was deeply scarred. They were wrong. I had given them 3 weeks to build a lie and 90 days to pay for their systemic toxicity. I had chosen a legal process that gave me total, non-negotiable control over their financial assets and total, clean severance from their emotional demands. The payment of the debt was not just money. It was the final, definitive cutting of the emotional cord. I had preserved myself, and now I had the resources to build a future free of their shadow. I knew the coming 90 days would be agonizing for them, a slow, methodical liquidation of their lifestyle. And I knew every payment that cleared my account would be a receipt for the end of their era and the beginning of mine. 1 year after I chose precision over forgiveness, I stood in my own library, having built a fortress of my own, making from the ashes of my sister's career. The seasons had barely changed before news reached me through a former academic colleague who kept tabs on industry gossip. Vivian Cole was unemployed. The public relations firm had let her go quietly, citing restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. Word travels fast in professional circles, especially when it involves someone who had burned as bright and as publicly as Vivian had. The whispers followed her unstable liability. That girl who poisoned her sister. She had sold the 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights at a significant loss, desperate for quick cash for the initial payments. Her jewelry went to a consignment shop. The leased luxury car was returned. My parents had withdrawn their entire pension fund and taken out a heavy second mortgage on their house. To make up the difference in the $900,000 settlement. The first payment had cleared, then the second. Each one was a chunk of the life Vivian had built on the foundation of everyone else's diminishment. My own world, meanwhile, had begun its slow, meticulous expansion. My library was a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and enormous windows that let in cascading sheets of natural light. The air smelled like old paper and lemon oil, that particular perfume of preserved history. Rows of custom-built shelves lined the walls, holding volumes in various states of restoration. Some were pristine, cataloged and waiting. Others were works, in progressed, spines carefully separated from text blocks, acid damage being painstakingly reversed with specialized chemical solutions. This was my company, Coal Conservation and Restoration. The settlement money had been the seed capital. $900,000 minus legal fees, minus medical expenses, minus the cost of the psychiatric care I needed to process what my own sister had done to me. What remained was enough to lease this spacious commercial space, buy specialized equipment, hire 2 junior conservators, and establish a reputation. It turned out, nearly dying, had made me something of a legend in certain academic circles. The book conservator who had almost been murdered, who survived and used the compensation to build her own empire. It was morbid, perhaps, but I did not mind. People remembered me. People hired me. And Magnus Thorne had opened doors I would never have imagined walking through. He had visited a month after the mediation. showing up at my tiny studio apartment with a contract already drawn up. His entire family heritage library. 400 years of Thorne family documents. First editions, personal correspondence. He had said simply, "I want you to preserve them." I had asked him why. Why trust me, who had just survived such a personal catastrophe, with something so valuable? His answer had been characteristically direct. Because you understand that some things are worth saving, and some things need to be cut out, like cancer. You know the difference. That contract alone was worth $200,000 a year for the next 5 years. It had given me instant credibility, attracted other high-net-worth clients, and allowed me to expand faster than I had dreamed. Now, a year later, my company was valued at $2.5 million. I walked through the library, trailing my fingers along the spines. Each book was a small universe, a preserved fragment of someone's world. I fixed them carefully, methodically, with patience and precision. I reversed the damage, stabilized what could be saved, and, when necessary, made the hard decision to let go of what was too far gone. It was meditative, solitary work. The kind of work that suited someone who had learned that not all relationships could be repaired, and sometimes the healthiest thing was to seal away the toxic elements and build something new. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Lewis. Final payment cleared. Case officially closed. The third and final installment. Vivian's debt, or rather, my parents' debt on Vivian's behalf, was paid in full. I stared at the message for a long moment, waiting to feel something. Triumph, maybe. Or closure. Instead, I just felt quiet, a deep, abiding peace. I walked to the restoration table, where a 16th century manuscript waited for my attention. The pages were brittle, edges darkened with age. But the text was still legible, still valuable, still worth saving. I sat down, pulled on my cotton gloves, selected my tools with the precision of a surgeon. Somewhere out there, Vivian was working for a telemarketing company in a fluorescent lit room, reading scripts to people who hung up on her, making $12 an hour. My parents were in their mortgaged house, resenting me, telling each other I had overreacted. Their opinions were like voices from a country I had emigrated from, distant, irrelevant, someone else's problem. My life was whole now. Brilliant. Built on the ashes of the career of the sister who tried to kill me, I had taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and alchemized it into something beautiful, permanent, and entirely mine. My hands, which had once clawed desperately for air, now worked with a steady confidence. I opened the manuscript, began assessing the damage, planning the restoration. The task was clear, the path forward certain, and for the first time in 26 years, I was exactly where I needed to be.